Hey guys, this is Srinivas and you're watching my basic Python tutorials in my channel Python for Microscopists on YouTube. And again, these videos are intended for beginners and students, researchers, beginners when it comes to programming with a focus on image processing tasks. So today I'm going to quickly explain what Python is and then proceed on to actually looking at some code and start doing some coding in the next videos. So in summary, Python is it's actually the fastest growing programming language. Yeah, you probably heard of C, C++, Fortran. So Python is a programming language, but it is very fast growing language, mainly driven by the scientific community and also by the machine learning artificial intelligence community. And the reason behind this is think of Python as a batteries included version of programming language. Most of the libraries, or most of the code actually is prepackaged in the form of libraries. So to perform advanced operations, it's just one line of code in Python because we just import the existing library. We don't need to write a whole bunch of code just for example, for edge detection in an image. We just import a library and then find out exactly what line we need to type, and that's pretty much it. And this is exactly why Python is becoming very famous lately. And also it's famous because it works on any operating system. You can work on Windows, you can work on Mac, Linux, and so on. So that's another reason. And it is a high-level language, meaning it kind of abstracts the underlying technical details. For example, you don't have to worry about memory management. That could be a limitation if you're an advanced programmer, who is familiar with C++ and all that, and you would like to assign memory and all that kind of stuff. Then Python is probably not the right choice for you. But for scientific programming, this is basically the best programming language. And also it's a general purpose language, so it's not really for statistical analysis only. It's not for web development. It's not for this. It's a general purpose language, so it can be applied for many applications. And also it's an interpreted language. That's the best part I personally like about it. I have done some programming in C and Fortran in the past where you write everything, and you compile that into an executable, and then you get some errors, you go back and then you try to fix these bugs and so on. But this is a interpretive language, meaning as you can type, you can actually check, you can run the code and no need to compile or anything. In a way, if you are used to MATLAB, this is very similar to MATLAB. And also, because it's growing very fast, the user community is humongous. So if you need any question, literally you can get an answer in a matter of minutes, maybe seconds. If you just quickly search on Google, someone may have already asked that question before. So it's the support is extremely good when it comes to Python. And as I mentioned earlier, the biggest advantage is libraries. For example, a library called NumPy, has numerous functions for scientific computing. A library called scikit-image, which we saw in our previous video, it has tools for image processing. A library called matplotlib has all the tools for plotting. So, and we saw this in our previous video. In fact, let's open the screen again. So you can see in this example, I just imported CV2. Scikit-image, and then we actually opened an image and performed edge detection just by running one single line of code. So, so in summary, I think that kind of summarizes what Python is. And just to introduce like a couple of terminology before we move on. Again, I mentioned this in my previous videos. To write Python, to do any programming, you need to use an IDE, integrated development environment. It's nothing but a program where on one side, in this example, on one side you have a place where you can type your text, and depending on the type of IDE you use, sometimes it's intelligent enough for you to suggest exactly how to write your code. When you're writing your code, when you hit dot, For example, when I do CV2 dot, it opens up, okay, what do you want to do next, right? So this is one of the advantages of an IDE. And a couple other terminology, I already talked about importing CV2 or scikit image. These are called libraries. Libraries are these pre-packaged, let's say, containers or pre-packaged pieces of code that you just import into your existing code, and then you can just use all the individual functions within that library for a specific task. And a variable is another term that you probably would hear, and a variable is nothing but a placeholder in memory for something. For example, we can just say define a variable called a, and I am assigning a value of 3 to that variable. Yeah, and I can define another variable called let's say b, and the value here is 5.0. And another variable called c, and this is nothing but a plus b, for example. Yeah. And in this IDE, I have something called Variable Explorer. It's actually keeping track of my variables, what type of, what data type. This is another term that would be useful, for us. So for example, 3 is an integer, 5.0 is a floating value number. So these are different types of data types. In fact, I can also have d equals hello. Yeah, and in this case, d is a string. Okay, so there are different data types. This is another thing that we need to understand, and a few other terminology which I'll introduce as we go along, like for example, functions. If we would like to do a specific type of task over and over, we can define a function and then call that function later on into the program. And a part of the function takes parameters as inputs. So these are the parameters, and there are other things called classes and everything else. So luckily, we don't need to get very deep into all of these. Again, I'll let you explore those later on once you get enough basement, enough fundamentals in Python. So let's not worry about all of that yet. So in summary, Python is a fastest growing programming language. Its syntax, or the way we write the code, is very similar to English. So it's easy for beginners to actually learn this. And because it comes with a whole bunch of libraries, it's easy to write advanced algorithms even for image processing using Python. And it's very well supported by the community. So again, another reason why we prefer to use Python. And there are a couple of terminology, and IDE is integrated development environment, and I'll talk about that in the next video, how to install your favorite IDE and everything. And we talked about variables, and we talked about functions, and we'll talk about them more in our future videos. So I hope you found this video helpful. At least it gives a very quick introduction of what Python is, and at a very high level how the structure of the code looks like. So let's continue our discussion in the next video. Thank you very much.